We just heard from Steve Bisciotti for the first time in a long time, and he had a lot to say. He explained his decision-making behind the John Harbaugh firing, why he did it over the phone, Super Bowl expectations for the next head coach. Eric DeCosta and Steve talk about Lamar Jackson's involvement, the Lamar Jackson extension, and what this coaching hiring process looks like. So we're going to discuss every single takeaway from this press conference in this episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. So we just heard from Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta, and they talked about a lot, from the John Harbaugh firing, details behind it. We'll start with Steve's reasoning to fire Harbaugh at this point. He said that it was his sole decision, although he did talk to vets. He talked to Lamar on Monday night, and he said pretty much after the loss, he kind of had made his mind up. He talked to Eric 3 to 4 weeks prior, so some higher-ups in the front office knew that Steve was contemplating this decision. Steve said that Lamar was concerned about the reports that he didn't have a good relationship with John Harbaugh or Todd Monken. He said that's not true. He doesn't understand where it's coming from, and maybe they do need change, but that is up to Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta to make those decisions. And Steve said that he told Lamar where he was leaning, but that it wasn't final until Tuesday afternoon. Steve's at his house. Harbaugh's on the way home from work, and Steve said he didn't want to make Harbaugh go back to the office. He felt that was even worse, so he just called him. Even though it wasn't the best way to fire him, he didn't envision doing it that way, but that's when he came to a decision. And I like the way Steve explained his thought process, because this is not an easy decision, man. Moving on from a head coach that you have had for 18 years is never an easy decision. And he trusted his instincts when he got to the point that he knew he wouldn't regret the decision. You know, okay, we were going to move on from Harbaugh. Can I live with that? Am I going to regret that? And he said he got to the point where he said, I won't regret it anymore. So now it's time. And I just like that he's trusting his instincts and also getting input from everyone else. You know, he talked to the front office 3 to 4 weeks prior. He spoke to a bunch of vets after the loss or around there. He spoke to Lamar. Like, he's taking in a lot of input. And ultimately, he pulled the trigger and probably went against the grain of a lot of the front office. Eric DeCosta, if you watched him during that press conference, is still hurt from this, you know, as the entire organization, I'm sure, is. But he didn't want Harbaugh to go. And Steve even explained that. He said the front office works with Harbaugh every single day. They are more tied to him. So they're closer to him, and they might not be able to see from a distance or have the same exact perspective that Steve does, or maybe even some fans even. You know, I know we're not the decision makers in this, but when the voice gets loud enough and the heat gets loud enough, it's usually there's some reason behind it. It's usually not for nothing. It may be misplaced a little bit, but there's some reason when that much volume, as Steve even put it, he talked about the fan base. He said when that much volume gets cranked up, sometimes it's better for everyone to split. Like, Harbaugh's going to get loved by a new city, a new organization, and there's not going to be a ton of heat, and fans aren't going to be calling for his job. It's a fresh start. And then also, now fans are excited about where the Ravens headed in the next direction. It's almost like you wipe the noise clean. And Steve also got specific about some of the shortcomings over the years that the Ravens have experienced and how that led to the firing of John Harbaugh. You know, blown leads in the fourth quarters, underachieving, regressing as a team. You know, you go from the AFC Championship to the divisional round to missing the playoffs. It was nice to hear from Steve and his thought process through this John Harbaugh firing decision, and it doesn't seem to be a clean one, you know, from the organization. Like, not everybody was on the same page, but that's why you're an owner. You know, you do have the most power, and ultimately it's your decision, and you got to trust that instinct, and that's what Steve Bisciotti is riding on. So the Ravens are headed in a brand new direction. The head coach search is underway. They interviewed Brian Flores today. Mike Tomlin's now available. Not that I want that, but I think it's interesting that John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin are available in the same year. That's pretty wild. I don't even know if Mike Tomlin's going to coach, but the Ravens are aggressively looking at who their next head coach candidate is going to be. And Steve Bisciotti said that he's not involved in the Zoom meetings right now. He wants candidates narrowed down to 4 or 5 guys, and then he will fly up. And he also called Lamar and offered his plane and said that, hey, we want you a part of this decision. Eric DeCosta's been talking to Lamar Jackson after every single head coach interview. And Steve said, if you want to be a part of this process, let's fly up when there's 4 or 5 candidates, when they've narrowed down who's going to be the in-person candidates, and we're going to sit there and have some long interview days and figure out who the coach is. Ultimately, it's Steve's decision, but he's taking input from everybody. That's Eric DeCosta, Ozzie Newsome, Sashi Brown, Lamar Jackson. Steve Bisciotti is a part of this, but right now during the Zoom interviews, it is mostly Eric DeCosta running the show, Ozzie Newsome, Sashi Brown. Eric is then relaying information to Lamar and getting thoughts, but they are going to do 15 to 20 Zoom interviews and then narrow it down to 4 or 5 guys that will come to the building for in-person interviews. And that should happen, with some urgency over the next month, I would imagine. They did talk about how some teams are late to actually hire them until after the Super Bowl, but it is important to be able to get your guy and start building out their staff. So there is some urgency here, but it is nice to hear that Lamar is pretty heavily involved. I mean, he's texting back with Eric DeCosta on the candidates and also told Steve, yeah, I think I will take you up on that to come up from Florida. If Steve said, if I'm flying up, you're flying up, and we're going to sit in these interviews and talk, you know what I mean? And I think that's so productive to have Lamar involved. It shows the commitment too, from both sides, because we got a Lamar Jackson extension kind of hanging over everyone's head right now. And Eric DeCosta talked about that, how that would free up a ton of flexibility. They can be aggressive. They can go after big ticket names if they get a Lamar Jackson extension done. And Steve Bisciotti spoke on the Lamar Jackson extension. He said that he's talking to Lamar. He expressed how important it is to get the extension done, to clear up cap and be able to have a fun offseason and really build this team up. The Ravens can be aggressive. They're carrying $10 million extra cap space over from last year, which is way more than usual. They have around $33 million cap space available. They can clear $30 to $40 million with the Lamar Jackson extension. The Ravens have plenty of money to re-sign their guys and go get a free agent and add some depth to this roster. Steve even said that if Lamar doesn't want to do the extension, they're probably going to have to add void years and do it anyway. You know what I mean? So it seems like they're going to clear some money up regardless, but hopefully everybody wants Lamar to just get an extension done with the Ravens. That will then clear a ton of cap for this offseason. The Ravens are going to have a lot of flexibility, and also Lamar Jackson's here for, an extra 3 years or whatever it ends up being, probably 5 years more from now. And the Ravens have commitment. Lamar has commitment. His yearly number will go up. An extension will have him paid more per year, but the cap hit will be lower than $74 million right now. And that just kind of tightens everything for roster flexibility. So before March, before free agency hits, we need a Lamar Jackson extension done. I think Lamar knows that. Steve said he made it clear to Lamar. So we'll see if everybody can get on the same page here, but it would be in the team's best interest and everybody's best interest, really. We can build a better team here if we can get that extension done, and obviously all of us want Lamar Jackson to stick around anyway, so hopefully that gets done pretty soon. The new year's here, but the grind continues, and I don't have a lot of extra time to cook. I'm always looking for something healthy that I can just make fast, and that's why I've been relying on Factor. These are fully prepared meals designed by dietitians, made by chefs, so you're eating real food without the shopping, cooking, or cleanup. But what I like most is what's inside the meals. Quality ingredients, lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, healthy fats, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no seed oils. It actually fits how I eat. They've got over 100 rotating meals weekly, whether you want high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean, GLP-1 support, or even ready to eat salads. Lately, my go-to is the grilled filet mignon and creamy Parmesan shrimp. Everything comes fresh, never frozen, and it's ready in about 2 minutes. No prep, no stress. I use Factor, and you guys should too. Just head to factormeals.com/flock50off and use code flock50off to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Another thing that really stood out to me is Super Bowl expectations for this next head coach and how quickly. Like in year one, is there pressure? You have to win the Super Bowl right now. obviously that is the goal always, to win the Super Bowl, but how much of a leash is Steve Bisciotti going to have with this next head coach? It seems like a long one. He said that they are going to be very thorough and make sure that they are very confident that whoever they hire and staff that they build out is good enough to be here for a long time. He said that when they brought Brian Billick in, they won a Super Bowl in 2 years. When they brought John Harbaugh in, they won a Super Bowl in 5 years. He joked and said, I'll give this guy 6, but then kind of later talked about how he's going to have patience. He doesn't want to be hiring a new coach every 2 or 3 years. He actually called that hell on earth. He said that this next head coach, they're going to be so confident that he's the right guy that they're going to build with him. And he talked about in 2008 when they hired John Harbaugh that nobody really knew who he was, and he wasn't like the hot coach on the market, and he turned into a potential Hall of Fame coach. I mean, John Harbaugh's had an incredible coaching career, and Steve kind of took a shot at Tony Dungy because a lot of the national media is, praising Harbaugh and saying he's the best coach on the market. And, Steve Bisciotti and the Ravens, good luck. You're not going to find another guy like John Harbaugh. And Steve's like, nobody was saying that in 2008 when we hired the guy that no one was talking about. And he became John Harbaugh with the Ravens. So their goal is to kind of do that again, get a guy that they believe in. They don't really care if he's the hot coach on the market or what his past is. They need a guy that they trust is going to fit with this organization and be able to win Super Bowls and take this team to a different level. But they're going to be confident in their decision, and hopefully he turns into a long tenured head coach and achieves, what John Harbaugh did or more. Another takeaway from today was Steve and Eric's evaluation of the roster construction and Eric DeCosta's job over the last few years, and especially last year. And he was pretty hard on himself. He didn't really talk about the offensive line as much. He kind of said that he knows there was a narrative about the offensive line and that they didn't, improve like they all thought. And Steve then made a comment and was saying that was coaching. He said our coaching should have taken our players to a different level, and we regressed instead. But I also think we need more talent on the offensive line. And Eric DeCosta scared me a little bit because he was like, we got pieces, the offensive line was good, and there was kind of a narrative that it wasn't, and it's like, nah, it wasn't that great, man. It could be so much better, and it needs to be so much better. But I also get that some of that was coaching for sure, but I'd like to get some new guards in here, no doubt. But other than that, Eric DeCosta was very transparent and critical about getting more pass rush. He did acknowledge that the Madubuike injury, which we still don't have an update on, he wasn't able to provide an update, but he did talk about how that hurt and really hurt the pass rush, and kind of pigeonholed Travis Jones from getting double teamed, and it just hurt everybody, man. Van Noy, Tavius, it just really bothered everybody. We'd be getting a lot more interior pressure if Madubuike was there, so that hurt. That was an unexpected loss, but he talked about how we need to get to the quarterback more. We need to collapse pockets. We need more pass rush. And he also said that they were very close to trading for an elite player at the deadline. I know we hear this a lot, but I was curious to know who that was, and it was during the pass rush topic, so could it have been a guy like Max Crosby or something? I'm not sure. But Eric DeCosta also said that if they have more flexibility this offseason, they are not afraid to take big swings. They do still value draft picks, but they're not afraid to get aggressive. And I think if they do get aggressive, it would probably be for a stud pass rusher. And the last thing that really stuck out from this is Steve is going to sell the team. He talked about kind of in the next decade, he wants to win a few more Super Bowls. And then when they probably have a bad year or two back to back, he's out. He's not leaving the team to his family. Eric DeCosta said he's out too. So I don't think the Ravens have a crazy long window. This probably is a sprint for 7 to 10 years here with Lamar, hopefully, and a new coaching staff, and hopefully we can get 2 or 3 Super Bowls in that run. And Steve's going to sell the team. That doesn't mean that the Ravens suck all of a sudden. I'm sure he's going to sell it to somebody that wants to win and is competitive as well, and hopefully is a good owner. But if you're losing guys like Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta, probably Ozzie at that point, that would be the ultimate change. Like everything would feel a lot different at that point. We're still far away from that. I don't want to act like that's coming around the corner, but he talked about it. He said he doesn't want to be Jerry Jones. He doesn't want to be in his 80s saying he would die for a Super Bowl. He wants to hang out, man. He wants to enjoy life. And I don't think that you're getting a long runway here, even though he's going to stay patient with this head coach. Yes, that's why they're going to make sure that the hire is somebody that they're really confident in. But I also think that they're going to be pretty aggressive in this next 10-year window here and try to get a couple Super Bowls and build a short-term dynasty here, man. I think that's definitely the goal, and I like that aggressiveness. I like that Steve went against the grain. I thought he was very open and transparent, and I always like that perspective, man. I like listening. Life's not all about money, but I like listening to somebody that's a billionaire and achieved and built businesses. He created businesses that are paying other people's families and jobs, and he's building opportunity for people. You know what I mean? You can call billionaires greedy or whatever, but also look how much they create. Like he's literally creating other jobs and opportunities for a ton of other people, for thousands and tens of thousands of other people, and also keeping a stable franchise together. I just respect hearing from him. So I liked what he said today, man. I like the honesty, the thoughtfulness behind why this decision happened, when it did, where they're headed, what they're looking for. And now next on the table is just narrowing down these 15 to 20 Zoom interviews to 4 or 5 rock solid candidates that Ozzie and Eric really believe in. And then Steve and most likely Lamar are also going to join them in interviewing these 4 or 5 candidates. And one of those guys will end up being the Baltimore Ravens' next head coach for however long this next era is in Baltimore. So crazy times, man. Change is right around the corner. It's right in front of us. We're in it. And the Ravens are going to look a lot different, but I also, am excited about the change, and I think that this will be a bright step in the right direction. So we'll see how it plays out. Let me know what you guys were thinking about this interview and just everything that's on your mind about what's going on, the head coach search. Let me know all your thoughts. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens Flock. Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. So I'm telling you now, it's about to go down. Podcast, the Flock Rundown. Ravens, baby. Nothing gets better than waking up